The Navajo are a tribe of Native Americans whose earliest settlements lay in the southwestern United States, primarily in what are now the states of New Mexico, Utah, and Arizona, along with their own ancient tribal war history. Throughout the Pacific Island campaigns, Navajo men proudly fought alongside fellow Americans during the Second World War. The now famed Navajo cod talkers and their unusual language was used to great effect for the encryption of American radio transmissions, which confounded the Japanese cryptologists who intercepted them. But the Navajo people also speak about things which confound the rest of us. They tell stories about strange things that creep and crawl around the wild desert expanses and forests of the Americas. LED legends which persist until the present day. One such popular Navajo legend is about evil witches, something that native people call Yossi. With it, he goes on all fours. Skinwalkers. Such a creature is considered half person and half animal. It starts as a medicine man or woman who once used their powers of healing for good, but for some reason they turn to evil, to murder, and to eating the flesh of their human victims, and so they are cursed. They are believed to be immortal. The only way to destroy one is to kill them in their animal form. Not only do skinwalkers bring pain and suffering to their victims, but they can crawl inside a person's mind and control them. They can make them hear things and see things that are not really there, or so the legends go. But while the Navajo people continue to pass down stories about encounters their ancestors have had with these creatures, it seems there are more than a handful of American service members who, while out training in the field, have likewise come face to face with something they could not explain, something that terrified them out of their wits, something that looked like an animal but spoke like a human. This is the smoke pit, and these are their stories about once used their powers of healing for good, but for some reason they turned to evil, to murder, and to eating the flesh of their human victims, and so they are cursed. They are believed to be immortal. The only way to destroy one is to kill them in their animal form. Not only do skinwalkers bring pain and suffering to their victims, but they can crawl inside a person's mind and control them. They can make them hear things and see things that are not really there, or so the legends go. But while the Navajo people continue to pass down stories about encounters their ancestors have had with these creatures, it seems there are more than a handful of American service members who, while out training in the field, have likewise come face to face with something they could not explain, something that terrified them out of their wits, something that looked like an animal but spoke like a human. This is the smoke pit, and these are their stories about once used their powers of healing for good, but for some reason they turned to evil, to murder, and to eating the flesh of their human victims, and so they are cursed. They are believed to be immortal. The only way to destroy one is to kill them in their animal form. Not only do skinwalkers bring pain and suffering to their victims, but they can crawl inside a person's mind and control them. They can make them hear things and see things that are not really there, or so the legends go. But while the Navajo people continue to pass down stories about encounters their ancestors have had with these creatures, it seems there are more than a handful of American service members who, while out training in the field, have likewise come face to face with something they could not explain, something that terrified them out of their wits, something that looked like an animal but spoke like a human. This is the smoke pit, and these are their stories about horseback through desert canyons, mesa, and open range. He eventually stopped along his route to rest for a while. While paused staring out at the desert expanse around him, he suddenly spotted an old man Coyote sitting on top of a hill not too far away. The man pulled out his rifle, took aim, and fired, watching the coyote drop to the ground. He then walked over to inspect his kill. Reaching the top of the hill, he was shocked to find not the body of a coyote, but a young Navajo man with long hair, at least part of a young man, and he was dead. The top half of his body was human, the skin painted with designs, and his lower half that of an animal covered in the fur of a coyote. Now horrified, the man who shot him looked around, wondering what to do. Spotting a deep crevice along the canyon's edge, he dragged the creature's body to the cliff and hurled it over the edge. His fear growing, he then mounted back up and rode his horse near to death, riding even past nightfall, trying to put as much distance between himself, the creature, and the place where he killed it. Finally crossing the Chuska Mountains, he reached his relative's home just past Shiprock, New Mexico. After recounting his story to them, they too experienced an unnatural fear. "You must never go back to your employer," they told him. "You have to stay here." The relatives of the Skinwalker will be looking for answers and they'll be out looking for you. It stands to reason that a creature that takes the form of a wild animal would more than likely be encountered in the wild. It should be no coincidence, then, that the majority of these following stories take place in the wild, unkempt regions of various military installations. What service members would call the field, after all military bases, are often built on the more undesirable expanses of undeveloped land, those which are often still covered in dense forests or vast expanses of unusable desert. These portions of land are therefore only differentiated from wildland by the long fence surrounding the base's perimeter, maybe with a mess of barbed wire adorning the top, but a fence only keeps out law-abiding people. Animals and unexplained creatures with a mind of their own will always find a way around such trivial man-made barriers. This first military encounter would seem to verify that they agreed not to tell their Arizona base encounter. Commander, you got any plans for this weekend? Yeah, I'll probably go see that new Rocky movie. There's another Rocky movie coming out. Yeah, who's he fighting this time? Apollo's kids know some commie bastard, some Russian thing that looks all right. You mind if I come see it with you? Girl just dumped me. Oh, again? Yeah, again. Oh, geez, hey, get your hands up. Damn, sir, old man, you scared the out of me, sir. Get your hands in the air. Get your hands up. Do you have any idea where you're at right now, old man? I think there's something wrong with him. Either he's deaf or he's got some sort of mental problem. Sir, get your hands in the air. Hey, go ahead and call this in. Yeah, let me get it. HQ, this is Rover 1. Com in. Over. HQ, this is Rover 1. The following account was submitted to the curators of the Paranormal Scholar website by Stacy C. on behalf of her Uncle Bob. My uncle Bob was in the Army last Thanksgiving. He got drunk and told us all a story that shocked me. It was around 1985, and he was still new to the Army, only being about 3 years in. He was on patrol duty on a base in Arizona. It was late, and he and another guy were walking along the fence line. Bob and the other guy were focused on looking out beyond the fence outside the base when they heard a sound behind them. The sound came from the inside, from their side of the fence. When they turned around, they saw an old man dressed in buckskin with long hair and braids. Bob described it as being so gray that it almost glowed in the moonlight. The man was standing approximately 30 feet behind them. Both men drew their weapons, as the old man was in a restricted area with warning signs all over the place. They could have shot him if they'd wanted to, but neither my Uncle Bob nor his buddy wanted to shoot an old man. They figured that he must have Alzheimer's and had wandered into the base or something. After all, he wasn't threatening them, and he appeared harmless. The men shouted to the old man, telling him he was in a restricted area and that he needed to put his hands in the air. Bob thought they'd walk him back to post and then call the local police department, who would be able to get him back home. Bob tried to call in a report, but it was just static, asking his friend to help. Both he and Bob turned to tinker with the radio, although they only looked away for half a second to quote my uncle, when they turned back, the old man was gone, sir. In his place was a massive rabbit just sitting there watching them. That's what he said, that when he and his partner looked back up, the man had disappeared, and there was this large rabbit sitting in his place. Sir, both men looked around right to left and back again to see where the old man had wandered off to, but he was nowhere to be seen. In that time, the rabbit took off towards the fence. Then again they heard a noise behind them, and when they turned around, the same as last time, the old man was there. This time, however, he was now on the outside of the fence. Get over the fence. The fence was a good 8 to 10 foot tall. There was no way this old man could have jumped it. Hell with this. Bob described how that sent him and his buddy off running, and they agreed not to tell their commander. Keep in mind that my uncle was drunk, but despite over 30 years having passed since that night, he still looked scared as hell when he told us that he had seen a Skinwalker. Although Stacy doesn't mention the name of the base where her uncle's story took place, I was curious if the base in question might be rather obvious. Arizona has several military bases, 3 of which are Army Yuma proving grounds on the western border with California, Fort Wooka near the southern border with Mexico, and Camp Navajo, which is up north near Flagstaff. Why do I have a sneaking suspicion that her uncle was stationed at the third one? The base was formerly named Navajo Army Depot in the early 80s and was and is still used as a munitions storage facility. Definitely seems like the kind of base that would call for routine perimeter fence patrols to ensure that no one unauthorized is entering into the Base to steal something or cause damage, and as the name would indicate, the land it occupies lies very close to what remains of the Navajo land and was undoubtedly occupied by the Navajo people in previous generations. Skinwalker guns. Skinwalker guns. The following story comes from an unnamed Marine who spent time training in a desert wasteland that is otherwise known as Marine Corps Base Camp Pendleton in Southern California. He submitted this story to Nick Orton, who runs the Tales from the Grid Square project. I've personally spent quite a bit of time roaming the desert on that base both day and night. Plenty of wild animals that a Marine can run across at any time. There's rabbits, mice, deer, skunks, coyotes, few bobcats, quail, road runners, hawks, owls, and the more dangerous animals like the OD buffalo, rattles, snakes coiled around the base of shrubs, and even one Marine in my group that was stalked during a nightland navigation course by a mountain lion. I've otherwise had my share of strange hallucinations out there, probably due to sleep deprivation and the mesmerizing effect of the green-tinted night vision goggles, but to my knowledge I'm the only one who saw those things when whatever this Marine and his buddies saw would arguably creep anybody out. He writes, my squad's name is Skinwalkers, and there's a story behind it. A little over a year ago we had a division-level exercise called Steel Night. My gun squad was attached to a platoon in a defense position above the Camp Horno combat town. While we were out there, one of my buddies told me how he had seen this Skinwalker when he was younger. It creeped us off all out when he said it was still following him to this day. We only had one boot in our squad, a Marine just out of boot camp. So me and my buddy took an hour of gun watch so my boot could get a little sleep, but instead of sleeping it's 30 minutes into this watch shift, so maybe around 0130 give or take, and this boot keeps saying he's hearing weird noises like the sound that the Predator makes, but says it sounds faster and louder. My other buddy that told us he had seen a Skinwalker when he was younger, he then tells us that the one he saw made that same noise, so that freaks us out. And we get real quiet and start listening for whatever this noise is. Sure enough, we hear it, this strange sound along with a screech and rustling in the brush that's coming from down the front side of the hill. I see something. We had a 13 Golf on the gun, which is a thermal optic, and I looked down the hill and saw this deer-looking thing. Deer, but it was standing on two legs. What the hell is this? As soon as I caught sight of it, it then ran straight up the hill, past our defense on the right flank, and then it dropped back down on all four legs and disappeared down the backside of this hill. My buddy Rick had a Skur, which is another type of thermal, and he saw that thing too. Since then we came up with the name Skinwalker guns, since we just say that's what it was and embrace it, and that's how our squad name came to be. Now I'm not one to knock a good story, but I have seen deers stand up on their hind legs and walk, usually when two bucks are fighting, or some other instance where one deer is showing signs of aggression, possibly trying to reach the lower branches of a tree to eat the leaves. I've never seen one that made predator noises run up a hill before, nor did I see it through thermals in the dead of night, after one of my buddies had just told me a Skinwalker story. All of that happening at the same time would make for a creepy experience in any case, but the following stories are not so easy to offer a rational explanation. Music. For hello tries to break right towards the nose of the plane and not jump, so hello. Jump master sees him going right and says nope. He reaches up, he grabs the overhead, and then donkey kicks his ass right out the door. I got out right after him, and he is screaming. Wait, what in the blue blazes? That line sounds a hell of a lot more like a woman. This next account comes from an unnamed soldier who is likely a member of the California National Guard and was serving on a security detail during a massive wildfire. The Dixie Fire of 2021 was the single largest wildfire recorded in California history. It burned nearly 1 million acres of land and destroyed multiple communities in the area, and with the rapid spread and size of the growing fire, it would seem the California Guard was assisting local authorities in blocking roads, preventing civilians from driving into areas that were burning or were in the direct path of the fire. The fire undoubtedly disrupted a vast amount of wildlife in the area, but for this soldier and his group, they appear to have encountered something in the forest that was in and of itself disturbing. He writes, this happened during the 2021 Dixie Fire in North Cal. My lieutenant, our driver PFC Bravo, and myself were driving around making the rounds and checking on all our guys out at their checkpoints. We got to one where our guys were blocking a road and they had one of those generator lights, so we stopped for a bit and we're all just standing around talking and making Conversation when we started hearing a woman screaming startled the hell out of. All 6 of us, my LT and I, ready up our weapons as we take a few steps towards the woodline. We had been told that if we hear a woman screaming, it's usually a mountain lion attacking a deer or something like that, but this sounded close and, honestly, it just sounded too much like a woman screaming, so my LT yells out hello, and I you not in his same exact voice we hear back, hello, what the hell, everybody back. In the trucks this wasn't an echo at all, it came clear as day from the direction we heard the screaming, and it was his exact voice. We all immediately said screw that. My crew and I got back in the truck and noped the hell out of there after telling Specialist Sierra and his crew to stay in the truck and to combat lock all their doors. Pretty sure a skinwalker was out there trying to get one of us. Creepy as. Tales from the Grid Square. Hell, as I mentioned earlier, these last few stories were shared with me by Nick Orton, a man who is currently serving in the U.S. Army and has dedicated much of his free time to gathering these kinds of short and often spine-chilling stories from his fellow service members and veterans. If you haven't checked out his work yet, you are missing out on some creepy and fascinating stuff, and heads up, he's got a second book out now, Tales from the Grid Square Volume 2. Combined, these 2 books account for nearly 500 bizarre reports from soldiers, sailors, airmen, marines, and Coast Guardsmen, as well as service members from foreign militaries. For me, there is just something both intriguing and yet highly unnerving when reading the accounts of dozens and dozens of servicemen and women from around the world who have never met each other, and yet, like these stories, they all report having these eerily similar and yet highly bizarre experiences during their time in the military. You can find next books by following the links in the description section of this video, the link at the top of the screen here, or by searching for the books on Amazon. With that, here is one final Skinwalker story from his collection, another unexplained tale from the Grid Square. I know you're there. I know you're there. AC for a parking problem. There goes the radio. Considering the man telling this story has Navajo blood, I thought it might tie up these counter stories nicely, not to mention that his is by far one of the most bizarre. Another military police officer out on night shift seeing terrifying things in the woods. He writes, I'm an MP at Quantico, and there's definitely been a couple of weird things I've seen on nights patrolling West's side. So I've been at Quantico for about 2 years as an MP. For those that don't know about Quantico, it's set up with 2 sides. Main side, where everything is east of Interstate 95, and the appropriately named West Side, where they do TBS, the basic school for officers, and all the ranges. West Side is pretty damn massive, like I'm talking it would take 2 to 3 hours to drive around it, and it has all of these unused back roads and old cemeteries from homesteads dotting the landscape, plenty of forgotten training areas too, dating back to World War II. When I was on night shift, I always asked to be the roving unit out there, 'cause it would give me a chance to scout out places to hunt or fish on my off days, and being the only unit out there and being left alone was pretty nice to just skate or do my own thing over my 10-hour shift. Now, I'm not a stranger to the woods or to the outdoors or anything. I grew up running around the mountains for quail and deer in Southern California as a kid, and spent a ton of nights out camping by myself in my teens, so there's really not much out there in nature that freaks me out. But one night in about November, when the nights get really dark real fast, I was done posting Marines out on the gates and was heading up to a far-off training area. I had my tree stand and trail camera that I previously set up and wanted to go take a look to see if anything had been around. To get there, you have to drive about 30 minutes up one road and then another 15 until you hit a long dirt road that dissects that part of the BAS in half, and in this particular area comms always suck, so without a working radio you're pretty much out there on your own. I parked my Durango on the offshoot, I grabbed my flashlight and started off heading into this creek bottom about a mile or so off the road. I've done this a ton of times, so I got there pretty fast. I grabbed the chip out of my trail cam and I hop up into my tree stand to take a look at it and to kill some time, and not even 5 minutes into flipping through pictures, most of which were of just some turkey that were hanging around, I hear someone, and I say someone because I thought it was a person, walking through the woods about 30 yards in front of me. Now, this is like the middle of the night on a training base, so a lieutenant who got lost doing Nightland NAV isn't out of the question, so I'm thinking maybe this is my chance to mess with them from up in my stand. I quickly close my laptop and I turn off my flashlight and I try looking out to see where They were, and I hear them walk closer and closer and then stop about 20 yards in front of me, and at that point, with the alum being fairly bright that night, I could make out the outline of what looked like a deer, which was kind of disappointing, so I just stayed quiet to watch where he was heading so I wouldn't spook him, and all of a sudden this thing starts bashing its head against a tree. Over and over and over and over until its entire skullcap was crushed and it was leaking blood and brain matter. Then this effing thing stands up on its hind legs and turns towards me as though it was staring directly at me, even with its eyes being clearly now useless, and then it spoke in the clearest tone I have ever heard in my life. "I know you're there." My stomach dropped and I was too frozen in fear to even think to draw my pistol, but then as quickly as it had walked up, this thing dropped back down onto all fours and walked away. I waited about 10 minutes shaking like a leaf trying to calm down before I left my laptop. I left everything I just hauled ass out of there, got out of my stand, ran back to my patrol car, and I grabbed my shotgun and I sat for the rest of the night in the lit parking lot of the MCX. It took about a month before I summoned up the courage to go back, grab my laptop and stuff I'd left there, and I went with a friend who I didn't tell what had happened, but I told him to bring his long gun as well. When I got there, I grabbed my stuff and I looked towards where the thing had been, and the tree was busted up with splinters everywhere and what looked like, the bone fragments and the mess, the blood scattered on the ground. Needless to say, I don't go out checking stuff in the middle of the night anymore, and I hunt on the complete opposite side of the base, and any time I do need to go by there now, I always take a shotgun in condition. I told my Navajo grandpa about this and he told me not to speak about it, but clearly, I don't listen well. It freaked the hell out of me, got me so messed up to the point where I don't even like going in the woods anymore. As I say, I've seen deer do strange things but talk, while the idea seems completely ludicrous. Navajo legend does say that skinwalkers possess the ability to enter a person's mind and make them hear and see things that aren't really there, so perhaps the voice he heard was only inside his own mind. Was no less terrifying either way. As for the animal's strange behavior, if it indeed was just an animal, I found at least one more account online where a young man recalled seeing this kind of behavior while hunting with his grandfather. No idea where it took place, but the two men apparently watched a deer slam its head repeatedly into a rock until its antlers and skull were shattered. The animal then clumsily licking its own brain matter off of the rock before standing upright like a human, he said, and then walking into the nearby river and drowning itself. Both the young man and his grandfather were also terrified by the experience. It likewise kept them from wanting to return to the woods, and quite strange, the story ends with a young man saying his grandfather moved to Florida shortly afterward for what he put in quotes as safety reasons. He makes no mention about having any suspicions about what this animal was other than just being a deer acting strangely, but it does make you wonder what about the animal's behavior by itself would have scared them so badly. Strange as it may seem, these are only a handful of the available skinwalker stories we have left to share. It would seem another particular Marine Corps installation in California likewise has no small amount of reported encounters with strange creatures roaming the desert backlands, and with all of the artifacts that have been found in the area, it would seem that the installation 29 Pals appears to have been built on what was once tribal land, a place where native people once undoubtedly lived and died, and quite possibly practiced dark music. Applause, credits, and closing message. Magic. Hey guys, thanks for sticking around for the credits. This video is being released just before Halloween of this year, so stay safe out there if you're going out with the kids. Otherwise, I don't have much to add here since I gave most of my own commentary during the episode, but one thing I did want to mention was about a man named Wally Brown. Wally was born in New Mexico, and his family can date their Navajo lineage back more than something like 500 years. Yeah, the Navajo more often refer to themselves as the D, which simply translates to the people. His grandfather was a medicine man, and so from a young age Wally's parents and tribal elders apparently saw that their son would also, he had the traits to also become a great medicine man, and so W began training and participating in traditional Navajo ceremonies from a young age. Wally and his family continue to maintain these traditions and have dedicated their lives to teaching others about them, and so, in one of his videos he has a YouTube channel, the Navajo Traditional Teachings YouTube channel, and in one of these videos Wally speaks at length, albeit somewhat grudgingly due to the topic being very dark, about the Navajo people's traditional beliefs in the relationships between skinwalkers, demons, and what he referred to as the Evil One. So if you wanted to learn more about the strange, dark, and mysterious side of Navajo legends straight from him, or learn more about the Now people, I'd recommend checking out his channel. But while watching his videos during the research for this episode, one couldn't help but to notice that along with his handmade walking stick, his traditional headwear, and a turquoise necklace, Wally always wears a particular medallion around his neck which bears an eagle, globe, and anchor, and proudly displays the words United States Marine Corps. A quick bit of research told me that Wally himself, along with being a Navajo medicine man who is unbelievably well versed in his people's ancient traditional teachings, he is also a Marine Corps veteran, having served in the 1960s. From what I gather, he never actually deployed to Vietnam, but remained stateside, and from his own account he said that he witnessed firsthand the hell of PTSD, and so in treating these wounded Marines in whatever his occupation was, he tried to apply a lot of these Navajo medicine teachings, whether it be the chanting prayers, healing ceremonies that he would use to try to bring these wounded men back, their minds back to a state of calm. So I know a lot of his buddies went to Vietnam, but I'm not sure if he did. I don't think he did, but anyway, from one Marine to another, I just wanted to acknowledge my sincere appreciation for his work and for sharing the Navajo people's and his own incredible legacy with the rest of us. Of course I have to give a shout out to my incredible patrons who you always see running the credits here. Thank you guys so much, as well as anybody who has greatly supported the channel by going to the website, picking up some merchandise, and certainly everybody who's ever sent me a story recommendation or a story submission. I'm still getting back to your emails, just trying to knock out a few episodes here. Appreciate your patience on that, but otherwise thank you guys so much. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We're happy to have you here, and with that, God be with all of you, no matter what you were dealing with, and I will see you in the next episode. Overseas bases that I've been to, where I got to visit some really hero front, unique, creepy places. There was, you get that sense after doing all these stories that anywhere that there has been a lot of chaos and violent death, particularly, it's like those emotions like just kind of get locked in the environment in some strange way when they're that intense, where to the point where that person's losing their life. That seems to have an effect on the environment, right? Welcome to the Hero Front Podcast, the 2022 Veteran Podcast of the Year winner. I'm your host, Josh White, and I talk with heroes around the world to inspire, educate, and to remind you that you are not alone. My own personal journey was marked by struggles like depression and alcoholism, which led me to almost lose my life. Now, after years of working on myself, I'm now less to say I have an abundance of pride and purpose, and I have made it my mission to share and spread these lessons by having insightful interviews with inspiring individuals, emphasizing trust, transparency, and meaningful conversation to drive positive action in our lives. Above all, I aim to inspire you to unleash your inner hero. We all have it in us, and it's time to bring it to the front lines of our lives. Let's get Captain